On a quiet August evening in Charlotte, North Carolina, passengers boarded a city train, expecting nothing more than an ordinary ride home. But within minutes, one young woman's life would be violently cut short, and an entire community would be left horrified by the brutality that unfolded. This is the story of Iryna Zarutska, a 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee who escaped a war zone in search of safety, only to meet an unimaginable fate on American soil. Her death has not only sparked grief, it has ignited nationwide debates over public safety, mental health, and justice. Tonight, we uncover what really happened inside that train, the failures that allowed it, and the haunting questions it leaves behind. Iryna Zarutska was born and raised in Kiev, Ukraine. Friends describe her as kind, artistic, and full of life. She had a passion for sculpting, fashion design, and animals. In fact, she dreamed of one day becoming a veterinary assistant. But in 2022, Russia's invasion of Ukraine forced her family to make an impossible choice: stay in a war zone, or leave everything behind in search of safety. Like millions of others, they fled their homeland. Eventually, they resettled in Charlotte, North Carolina, a city thousands of miles away from the missiles and air raid she once lived under. To Iryna, America represented peace, hope, and a chance to build a new future. She worked at a local pizzeria while adjusting to her new life. Despite the trauma of displacement, she remained optimistic. Those who knew her say she radiated resilience, always looking forward, never backward. But that hope would be cruelly stolen on the night of August 22, 2025. It was a Friday evening. At about 9:45 p.m., Iryna boarded the Lynx Blue Line train at the East-West Boulevard station in Charlotte. The train was moderately filled, commuters, students, and late-night travelers. For the first few minutes, everything seemed ordinary. Passengers chatted, checked their phones, or stared out into the night. But within just 4 minutes, everything changed. A man, later identified as 34-year-old Decarlos Brown Jr., entered the train. He hadn't paid the fare. He wasn't there to travel. Witnesses say he appeared agitated, pacing and muttering to himself. Then, without warning, Brown pulled out a knife. Passengers recall the horror that followed. Iryna, sitting quietly, not even interacting with him, became his target. In a sudden burst of violence, Brown lunged at her, stabbing her 3 times. One of those wounds struck her neck. Panic erupted inside the train. Screams filled the air as terrified passengers scrambled to escape. Some pressed emergency buttons. Others froze in shock. Iryna collapsed, gravely injured. The train came to a halt. Brown fled the car but was quickly intercepted by law enforcement who had been patrolling nearby. Within minutes, he was taken into custody. But for Iryna, it was too late. Despite desperate attempts to save her, she died from her injuries. What was supposed to be a routine ride had become a nightmare. To understand how this tragedy happened, we need to look at the man responsible, Decarlos Brown Jr. Brown's history is long and troubling. Over the past decade, he had been arrested multiple times for serious crimes: robbery with a dangerous weapon, breaking and entering, larceny, and even misuse of emergency services. But beyond his criminal record, Brown also struggled with severe mental illness. He had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. His own mother had pleaded for him to be placed under involuntary commitment earlier in the year. For a time, he was institutionalized. But he was later released, without proper long-term care or consistent supervision. Despite repeated arrests and ongoing instability, Brown remained free under cashless bail policies. To many, this is the most disturbing part of the story. A man with violent charges, untreated mental illness, and a long criminal history, was allowed to walk the streets. And on August 22, that freedom cost Iryna her life. Brown's attack on Iryna wasn't just random violence, it was the culmination of systemic failures. First, there was a security gap. While police officers were present in another train car that night, they weren't in the car where Iryna was attacked. By the time they realized what was happening, the damage had already been done. Second, the judicial system. Brown's long record should have raised red flags. Many ask, why was someone with repeated violent charges allowed back into the community so easily? Third, mental health care. Brown's schizophrenia was well documented. His mother sought help, but the system failed to provide lasting treatment. Instead of being stabilized, he cycled between brief hospitalizations, jail time, and the streets. And finally, the vulnerability of refugees. Iryna left her homeland to escape war. She came seeking safety. But the very country that promised refuge, failed to protect her from preventable harm. The murder of Iryna Zarutska has sparked outrage across Charlotte, and across the nation. Local leaders called it senseless and tragic. Charlotte's mayor promised to review safety measures on public transit. North Carolina's governor described the surveillance footage of the stabbing as appalling, vowing to push for stronger security funding. But the tragedy also became a political flashpoint. Former President Donald Trump used it to highlight what he called the failures of Democratic-run cities, demanding federal crackdowns on crime. Others pointed to it as proof that America's mental health system is collapsing. Meanwhile, the public was divided. Some focused on the danger of violent repeat offenders. Others highlighted the risks of neglecting those with severe mental illness. One thing was clear, Iryna's death was not just a personal tragedy. It was a mirror reflecting the deep cracks in America's justice and healthcare systems. Iryna Zarutska's story is heartbreaking, because it should never have happened. She escaped a war only to lose her life on a train, not to bombs or soldiers, but to a man who should have been helped, and who should have been stopped. Her death raises urgent questions we must all consider. How do we balance compassion with public safety? How many warnings must be ignored before action is taken? And how many more innocent lives must be lost before change becomes more than just talk? Iryna came to America searching for peace. Instead, she became a symbol of its failures. So I leave you with this question, was this tragedy inevitable, or could it have been prevented? And if it could, who is responsible for the life that was lost?